Hello YouTube. Today I want to get back to the field of cryptozoology, and the territories of course are Eurasia, more specifically Russia, former Russian Empire, and the Soviet Union. So I want to talk about ancient serpents and dinosaurs that could be found in Russia several centuries ago and maybe even nowadays. The emblem of the city of Moscow is well known in the world. It depicts Georgi, or George, the victorious, piercing the serpent with a spear. But few people realize that this is the same serpent, or a variety of its species, that was a very real creature and that once lived in the Russian forests. Old legends tell us that once upon a time, bloodthirsty monsters were found in the European part of Russia. Similar to dragons, they had a fierce disposition, attacking pedestrians and horseback riders, without a doubt tearing them to pieces. The fabulous Russian heroes, русские богатыри, they fought with such creatures, usually defeating selected monsters. These monsters were destroyed by medieval knights in order to win some princess's supportive look. And who knows, it is possible that prehistoric dinosaurs that survived even the Ice Age disappeared from the face of the earth because of such battles. I must add that the legends about such creatures existed in other lands that comprised the future Russian Empire and my motherland, the Soviet Union, and of course our neighbor to the east, China. This is not so absurd as it might seem at the first glance. After all, not only legends and tales tell us about mysterious monsters, reminiscent of the descriptions of primeval dinosaurs. There are other quite trustworthy sources telling about unknown dragon-like creatures. If you open the 30th volume of the complete collection of the Russian Chronicles, there you can find an amazing record dated by the year 1582. I translated several texts from the Old Slavic Russian language, while at the same time trying to retain the flavor of the speech of bygone times. Here is what the record stated. Last summer, ferocious crocodiles came from the river and blocked roads, ate many people, and people were frightened and prayed to God in all the land. And some would hide away, some were killed. The same year, Prince Ivan, son of Tsar Ivan, passed away in Sloboda on the 14th day of December. What were those crocodiles, or crocodiles, but I will explain later, that left that river and attacked people? This incident did not take place in faraway Africa, but in the vicinity of the great Russian city of Novgorod. Maybe the chronicle fibbed to embellish historical records, but here's another record made by Jerome Garcia, or Garcia, an agent of the English trading company and most likely a spy sent to the distant and mysterious Muscovy. In 1589, he once again went to Russia and in Poland became an eyewitness to something incredible. In his diary, the following entry was preserved. I left Warsaw in the evening, traveled across the river, where a poisonous dead crocodile was lying on the bank. My people ripped open its belly with spears. At the same time, such a stench spread around that I was poisoned by it and lay sick in the nearest village, where I met such sympathy and Christian help that quickly got better. Strange lizards, uncharacteristic of our fauna, or animal kingdom, are also found in the memoirs of the Austrian ambassador to Russia, Sigismund Herberstein, who visited Russia and its neighbors in 1517 and 1526, and was undoubtedly a capable, detail-oriented secret agent. And I mentioned him in my other videos too. Here are his words about Žemaitija, or Žmud, part of the present-day Lithuania. This area is replete with groves and forests, in which frightening phenomena can be observed. It is indeed that even now that there are a lot of idol worshippers who feed at home some kind of snake with 4 short legs like lizards, with a black and fat body, and with some fear then reverently worship them, crawling out to the served food. The German-born Russian historian of the 18th century, Gerard Miller, mentioned indigenous people called Aryans in his work titled Description of the Kingdom of Siberia. They inhabited the mighty Yenisei River shores during Miller's travels in the area. The Aryans of one settlement perished because of a massive invasion of giant snakes. Among the serpents, one was of unusual size, with a large head and a body that was shiny like gold. And now we need to look at the European part of the country in the same century, fabulous century, 18th century for Russia, and very dangerous century. Anyway, a mission sent by Peter the Great brings us to another episode in the cryptozoological history of the empire. The Kunstkamera, or Kunstkammer, is the first museum in Russia. Established by Tsar Peter the Great and completed in 1727, the Kunstkammer building hosts Peter the Great Museum of Anthropology and Ethnography, with a collection of almost 2 million items. For those interested, it is located on the Universitetskaya embankment in St. Petersburg, facing the Winter Palace. If you can, visit it. Mysterious unknown crocodile, this time under the name of Arzamaski monstrous, or the monster of Arzamas, again appeared in the Russian lands at the beginning of the tumultuous 18th century. Written testimony of this event was discovered in the archives of the town of Arzamas. In the summer of 1719, on June the 4th, in the daytime, there was a great storm, tornado and hail, and many cattle and various animals perished. And a serpent fell from the sky, burned by God's anger, and stunk disgustingly. And remembering the order of our all Russia, sovereign by God's grace, Peter, son of Alexei, from the summer of 1718, about Kunstkamera, and collection for it all various wonders, monsters and freaks, celestial stones and other wonders, this serpent was thrown into a barrel with strong double wine. This term, double wine, refers to vodka. Unfortunately, the barrel or cask did not arrive in St. Petersburg Museum. It was either lost along the way, or the Russian peasants, not a squeamish lot, commandeered vodka from the barrel or cask and used the rest of the contents as snacks. The nature of the Arzamas monster or monstrous remained unsolved. Did the tornado bring a real crocodile from distant lands? Indeed, according to the description, the stinking monster that fell from the sky had short legs and a huge mouth full of sharp teeth. Or somewhere in the dense Russian forests, the last mysterious creatures mentioned in the Novgorod Chronicle were slowly going into extinction. Or maybe they're still alive. Recently, Russian newspapers reported that something appeared in the Desna River, tearing fishing nets to shreds in one motion. Attempts to catch an unknown creature have so far failed. Who knows? Maybe ancient reptiles like those mentioned in all chronicles and sealed on the Moscow coat of arms have not yet been extinct in modern Russia. Thus far, I presented several historical sources that tell about very similar phenomena. Isn't that worthy of attention? And I have a personal story which I'll talk about later. Of course, you can brush aside these testimonies, since they obviously do not fit into the usual picture of the world. That is exactly what scientists once did with the story of one pilot who crashed on Komodo Island in the Java Sea. It was in 1912, returning home, he began to tell incredible stories about some bloodthirsty monsters that supposedly live in those places. It was not until the summer of 1926 that an expedition of zoologists arrived on the island and really discovered the giant relic lizards and called them dragons of Komodo Island. These prehistoric animals number no more than 1,000 species, I guess, and they reach a length of 3.5 meters and weight about 150 kilograms. Giant lizards are quite aggressive. Sometimes they steal sheep from the tenants, and they hound envelopes. They hound down antelopes. A well-known German hunter who killed during his life many lions, tigers, and other dangerous predators died on the island of Komodo under unclear circumstances. He went to photograph a pack of lizards and did not return. On the shore of the swamp, they only found his shoes and mangled camera. It is possible that he was convinced of the authenticity of the existence of relic creatures through his own sacrifice, so to say, because he became a victim of these ancient creatures. Maybe something similar was once found in the Russian forest. I want to believe that one day cryptozoologists will be interested in the legends of the Russian crocodiles. After all, more than once, checking such rumors, they were convinced that folk legends do not arise from nothing. Maybe the crocodiles of the Novgorod forests are also miraculously preserved prehistoric lizards that lived on the territory of Russia a few centuries ago. There is no answer. Let me throw some more food for thought to possible researchers of this mystery. In the manuscript of the Great Synodal Library of the 17th century, a Christian chronicle writes about how the people wept when the damned thing, or cursed thing, was caught in the Volkhov River and then deprived of its life. The lizard was solemnly buried by local pagans in a high grave, in a mound. They even celebrated Trizna for the creature. Trizna was a funeral feast of ancient Slavic religion, which was conducted for distinguished members of society before their cremation. Let's look for more evidence. Reconstructing the ancient cult of underwater and underground lizards, Soviet academician Rybakov in 1987 paid special attention to the north of Europe. It is in the north, land of lakes, the image of the lizard is frequent and very stable. Traces of this cult are also found in Novgorod. This circumstance is remarkable in that it was here, at the source of the Volkhov, that the indigenous Chud tribes and the recent colonist Slavs once came into contact. There is a legend that is connected with the territory. The legend was written in the Mazurin Chronicle, in the volume 31 of the complete collection of the Russian chronicles. Here's what it says. The great prince Sloven established the city of Slaviansk, now called Novgorod the Great. From that time on, the Scythians began to be called Slovens, or Slavyani. And the river that flows into Lake Ilmen, they called by the name of Sloven's wife, Sheloni. The name of his youngest son, Volhovets, they gave to the Oborodnaya Anna branch, which flows from Volkhov and then flows into it again. For those that do not know, an Anna branch is a section of a river or stream that diverts from the main channel or stem of the watercourse and then rejoins the main stem downstream. Let's go back to the chronicle. The older son of Sloven was a devil worshipper and wizard, and by his devilish cunning turned into a ferocious animal crocodile, positioned himself in the Volkhov water passage, and those who did not obey him, he either devoured or turned over and drowned. During archaeological excavation in the Novgorod and Pskov regions, numerous images of the lizard are found on the rafters of houses, on oars, on shamanic plaques, on the handles of buckets. This is very real kind of creature with an elongated snout and a huge toothy mouth, similar to one of the many species of prehistoric sauria, most likely the Mosasaurian, as it is depicted in the reconstructions of paleontologists, and called in the annals, in the Russian annals, or chronicles as Korkodil. The ancient Russian word Korkodil is deciphered by modern philologists as combination of two words, korka, crust in Russian, and dil, horse in Slavic. Korkodil, a horse covered with hard skin scales. According to the description, both small and large predatory inhabitants of the Volkhov, Ilmeny, and other rivers are more similar not to reptiles, they're more similar not to reptiles, but rather to Stegoceras, a genus of dome-headed dinosaur that lived in what is now North America during late Cretaceous period, about 77.5 to 74 million years ago. They, however, became extinct at the beginning of the Mesozoic, but their relatives, brush-finned fish, were able to survive to this day. So perhaps somewhere in the Lake Ladoga or on small lakes in the middle of the marshes of the Leningrad region, there is still a colony of relic Stegoceras. In addition, the relic crocodile is not alone. The second such relic, flying serpent, it seems really lives in the swamps of the Vepsian region. But that's for my other future videos, dedicated to more tales of strange snakes and serpents of European Russia and the Urals. The serpents of the far east of Russia I have already described in my video that you can find in the playlist. Today it is difficult to believe in the existence of mysterious creatures, but if you remember native folklore where these reptiles are mentioned, you can't help but wonder, how could our ancestors know about such monsters? Or maybe they actually encountered them. The logbook or register of the second half of the 19th century, which described the property of one of Belarusian churches, mentions the skeleton of a crocodile. As soon as we opened the church cellar, we saw skeletons, very ancient, because they were no longer yellow but white. One skeleton was as if of a male, only of huge size, and another kind of animal like crocodile. They lay side by side. I want to mention something to you. When they described the skeleton, the term they used, that it was very, very white, or white. Also, there was a word that I cannot understand the meaning, that why it would be here. There were some items, something that was lying between the animal and the male human skeletons. The word makes no meaning, and this is a very interesting testimony, so to say, or evidence, and maybe someday we'll know more answers. But more about Belarus here. According to the legends, the Tatar swamp located within the city of Minsk was inhabited by large black lizards that resembled crocodiles. In size, they were much smaller than African crocodiles. Their length reached only half a meter. However, these animals were quite aggressive. During the frequent floods of Svisloch, the creatures crawled out of the swamp and into the streets of the city, and could bite people. The last Minsk crocodile was killed in 1885, after which its effigy was placed in the office of the director of one of the city's schools. However, during the First World War and the Civil War that followed in the Russian Empire, it disappeared without a trace. But what about modern Eurasia, modern Russia? Let's look at some mysterious monsters that are rumored to be found there. The Saratov serpentine worms. In 2016, an intriguing piece of information came from the Saratov region, where uncanny creatures were found that are a hybrid of a worm and a snake. A year earlier, the villagers from Mokraya Archovka noticed in the hollow a strange formation of rounded things. Local farmers have called the find dinosaur eggs. After that, the village reached out to the researchers. And after conducting a number of chemical examinations, scientists have identified an unacceptably high level of iron content in the formations. This meant only one thing: the eggs were of animal origin. They represented a sphere and had a diameter of 50-70 centimeters. Legends about dragons or fiery serpents existed in the Saratov region for a long time. Here on the Mount Uwek once stood a city with the same name. It was one of the richest settlements of the Golden Horde, remnant of the Mongol Empire, founded around the middle of the 13th century. The last finds which are associated with it are dated to the 17th years of the 14th century. So what became of Uwek after that is unknown. It is assumed that the city was destroyed by landslides on the Volga bank and then finally sacked by Tamerlane at the end of the 14th century. However, archaeologists name another reason for the decline. The legend says that the city was destroyed by a giant serpent that appeared from the ground and singed the ruins of Uwek with its fiery breath. There are many legends about mysterious monsters that live in lakes. Moreover, the appearance of lake monsters was very diverse. In the Latvian lakes lived either snakes or dragons called pulkis. The English were quite wary of the grumps, if I pronounce it right, which occasionally splashed noisily in the warm water and looked like long and shiny blunt-nosed dolphins. And very beautiful were the French tarascas, those that were occasionally eaten by fishermen. This half-beast, half-fish was drawn like a dragon with a beautiful thin head and a long curved neck. Chinese Yu Loon was famous for its vile character. Wait till we get to the Caspian Sea, but that's later. Gradually, lake monsters passed into the category of fairy tale characters like dwarfs and trolls. When in the middle of the 20th century, people suddenly appeared telling about the amazing creatures living in the lakes, and of course, a few other people believed them. The reading public has developed a condescending attitude towards such witnesses. Again, they say, another half-wit, so another Nazi. If they did not catch the creature in the net and did not bring it to the zoo, then they must be lying. And people who for many years were considered to be honest and worthy, now, but suddenly they started talking about seeing a strange head on a high neck in the water, they immediately passed into the category of notorious liars who dreamed of their own photo on the front pages of the tabloids. But what is interesting is that in all stories, without exception, according to Russian researchers, we are talking about lakes that have an ancient glacial or meteoritic origin, and it does not matter about their size or distance from the human settlements. For example, in the Medvezhye lakes near Moscow, local residents see some strange monsters every now and then, and the talk of evil spirits boiling and bubbling in shallow reservoirs began long before the appearance in newspapers around the world of murky photos of the thin-necked Nessie. But the structure, siltiness, and origin of the Medvezhye lakes are similar to Loch Ness. There are powerful undercurrents, and folktales about the second bottom is explained by geologists by the flow of karst waters that break through caves and cavities. So another underwater lake lives its mysterious life under the thick layer of silt. Expeditions sent by the Institute of Paleontology to Medvezhye lakes did not catch any dinosaurs, but they did not disprove the possibility of their existence. And the locals keep repeating their own. Right in front of us, 5 meters away, a wave rose and a huge black driftwood crashed into the water. You could see that it was alive and it was all glossy, and it swims fast like a motorboat. For a long time, paleontologists have told us that the ancient lizards died out, became extinct 70 million years ago. All of the dinosaurs died, became extinct. That is what is being taught in schools. But then it turned out that the brush-tailed fish, which was considered extinct, was still alive. And the tuatara is a lizard-like reptile, often described as a living fossil from the dinosaur age. It's only found today in New Zealand, but it's out there. Who knows what else is out there? In dense, remote forests, at the bottom of our oceans. I heard very interesting stories when I was in Brazil, but that's for some other videos. Zoologists believe that in order for the species to survive, you need to have a herd of 20 healthy individuals. For such small lakes as Loch Ness or Medveji lakes, the presence of so many large animals is simply unrealistic. They have nowhere to feed and hide. Their corpses and skeletons would certainly have caught the eye of the researchers. However, it is known that in Loch Ness, there are undercurrents that carry away and drag everything that falls into the lake. Its waters never wash up dead fish or drowned people. Everything that falls to the bottom of the lake is covered with a thick layer of silt forever. In the Medveji lakes, too, there were bottomless karst caves and turbulent undercurrents that killed careless swimmers, and a thick layer of silt. If you believe the stories that exist in different places of the world, then there are many lakes where prehistoric monsters live on Earth. In the Kol-Kol, that's in Kazakhstan, lake, water spirit Aydahara eats birds and animals. It was once seen by Kazakh local historian Pechersky and described as a giant snake which is more than 50 meters long. By the way, judging by archaeological finds at the village of Volodin Kamen in the Perm animal style, the image of a lizard was associated with the underground world, and its master. And according to a prominent Perm historian and archaeologist, doctor of historical sciences, Beluga, can be considered, among other things, as a personification of the patron spirit of metallurgists. In the Atlas of Spitzen, called Shamanic Images, published in 1900, there are more than 100 drawings of chewed images with the image of lizards. But Ural cryptozoology really deserves a separate video lecture. I mentioned Urals on a number of occasions in my other videos, but there is much more to say. However, let's look now at Siberia. Let's look at the monster of Lake Chani. At first glance, Chani are a completely calm reservoir. For many years, only local residents and visiting fishermen knew about the frightening events taking place on the Lake Chani in the Novosibirsk region. They listened with pleasure to the legends about the monster that supposedly lives in the reservoir. After 2011, general public started talking about the frightening phenomenon. The first mention of the Lake Chani, and Chan in Turkish is a large vessel, and we use this word in Russian quite a lot, dates back to the beginning of the 17th century, when the detachment of Ataman Semyon Kulagin, or warlord Semyon Kulagin, went to the vast territory that is now called the Barabinsk lowland. According to the preserved descriptions in those early years, the lake's water area was 6 times larger than today's, and according to chronicles, it resembled a sea filled with salt water. This protected area impressed Russian pioneers or conquistadors of the local variety with the abundance of various fish and game that lived in its vicinity. The newcomers were also surprised by the fact that there was no human habitation on the picturesque shores of the lake, and even at some distance from it. In 1702, the first fishing settlement appeared on the island of Medveji, which after 5 years was deserted for an unknown reason. The inhabitants up and left the village. Almost 4 decades later, a new settlement appeared on the Chomny Peninsula. However, this time the fishermen left the habitable place. About the reasons for their departure in 1787, the geographer Pallas, who had made a trip to Chani a year before, wrote that the inhabitants of the village were scared by a huge snake that supposedly lives in the waters of the lake, rips gear, breaks boats, and even attacks people. With the onset of the 19th century, marked by the expansion of the Tomsk province, the lake area began to be actively populated, and the coastal steppe territory was developed by agricultural communities. In 1895, hydrological works were started on the rapidly shallowing lake. Under the guidance of engineer Zhilinsky, and 15 years later, a group of scientists, ichthyologists from St. Petersburg, headed by Skorikov, who would later write a work called Lake Fishing in the Barabinsk region. That's interesting. In the first time, a scientist mentions the strange discovery, which was made in shallow waters near the peninsula Zelenak. In particular, Skorikov found a fragment of a fox carcass with lacerations made by large teeth of an unknown creature. This gave the scientists a reason to assume that the lake may encounter such large breed of predatory fish such as bluefish, spiny dogfish, Chinook salmon, or even a starry moray. However, local fishermen, according to the memoirs of the ichthyologist, claimed that nothing like this had ever been caught in their nets. For the first time, scientists were truly baffled when a group of researchers from Leningrad University came to the Barabinsky district in 1932 to study the flora of the lake. From the surviving diary entries of the expedition, it is known that on a clear, windless day on August 24, a member of the expedition, Arseny Believ, noticed large driftwood on the surface of the reservoir, about 100 meters from the shore. First, he did not pay attention to it. However, soon the scientist heard the splashing of water, and when he turned towards the lake, he saw how a massive driftwood suddenly came to life, arched, and then began to sink to the depth, forming a seething funnel around itself. Similar mysterious phenomenon the Leningrad scientists were able to observe at the end of October, just before the first frost, near the island Chinaiha. Only this time the mysterious creature, whose back was only visible, resembling the trunk of a felled pine, for several minutes slowly swam at a great distance along the coastline. Residents of the village of Yudino, whom visiting researchers asked for clarification, said that in their lake there is a certain creature that they call the sea devil. From its scattered descriptions, scientists have compiled an approximate portrait of the lake monster, according to which the creature has a massive serpentine body reaching a length of up to 10 meters and a large, somewhat elongated head with a large mouth. Old-timers of the village told that the sea devil was seen in the lake at the end of the 19th century, and since then there is no escape from it. According to them, the bloodthirsty inhabitant of the lake sometimes attacks cows and horses, whose bitten carcasses are sometimes carried by the tide to the gently sloping shore of the lake. Sometimes its victims are people. So in the period from 1930 to 1932, more than a dozen fishermen died in the lake, and their bodies could not be found. After making a detailed report about the mysterious inhabitants of the lake, the scientists left. What became of the information received is unknown. Perhaps further research into this phenomenon was hindered by Stalin's purges that soon began, and then the Second World War. The sea devil was forgotten for 4 decades. Once again, the mysterious inhabitant of the lake reappeared after an earthen dam was built near the Yudinsky Stretch in order to prevent shallow of the lake. As a result, the water level in Chani increased significantly. Hydrologists in some places of the lake began to note a 7-meter depth. It was on one of these deep water areas in January 1973 that a tragedy occurred when one of the winter fishing enthusiasts strangely fell through the ice. Eyewitnesses told that at first the thick crust of the ice cover of the lake bulged under the man, and then as if some force pulled him down, after which the figure of the hapless fisherman quickly went into the icy water. Another case occurred in the fall of 1989, when fishermen off the island of Cheremukhavi caught a gnawed human skeleton without limbs and head. Police officers and prosecutors who conducted an investigation of this case found that the remains belonged to a Novosibirsk tourist who disappeared in the early summer of the same year. According to the conclusion of the forensic medical examination, the deceased was attacked by a large animal of unknown species. In times more recent, according to the testimonies of residents of villages located nearby, the lake monster has become active again. So from the story of a resident of the village Kvashnino named Ronina, it follows that due to the fault of an unknown creature in the village, 2 or 3 people die every year. In 2009, the monster killed her 13-year-old grandson, capsizing the boat and dragging the young boy into the water. Representatives of the official authorities assure that the tragedies that have received a wide response are not caused by a mythical monster, but by commonplace human carelessness and love for drinking alcohol and water. In addition, the depth of the lake is not able to hide such a large, as follows from numerous descriptions, animal, if such a thing actually exists. However, researchers of paranormal phenomena hold very different points of view. One exotic idea promotes presence of entrance to the mystical and fabled Shambhala through the lake. But here is something very interesting. In 1997, during excavations in the coastal southwestern part of Chani, of an ancient settlement dating to the 6th, 7th centuries BC, archaeologists came across a large number of artifacts depicting a giant serpentine lizard. Perhaps even then the ancient people not only knew about the existence of this mysterious creature in the lake, but also worshipped it as a powerful deity of these protected places. So the monster existed in activity and in the same area. Now I want to visit the shores of Caspian Sea again. I have produced a video about underwater humanoids encountered there. You can find it in the playlist in my channel. And every year, I want to say that every year, hundreds of people, those on vacation, scuba divers, poachers, fishermen, they disappear without a trace in the waters of the Caspian Sea. What happens to them is a complete mystery. There are no witnesses. However, sometimes the waves bring to the shore terribly disfigured corpses or fragments of the corpses, as if mangled in a gigantic meat grinder. What is this terrible disaster that destroys people? Some claim that the sharks are responsible. In the summer of 1998, a detained poacher who miraculously survived told the following story. It happened not far from Fort Shevchenko. The poacher and his friend went out to the sea and to their favorite spearfishing spot. About 10 o'clock in the morning, they reached it and dropped anchor. His friend stayed in the boat, and the poacher put on his scuba gear, took his rifle, and went into the deep water. Less than 5 minutes later, a few meters away, he saw the giant body of a beluga. The poacher was happy about the prey. In its belly, the best caviar would cost 30 kilos. But to shoot it, that would be reckless. It was too big. So the fish is more than 5 meters long and weighs more than a ton. It's like trying to harpoon a whale. So he swam away from the fish so its tail would not maim him. The beluga, it doesn't attack humans, but its size is enormous. The poacher, who was at ease now, was swimming on, looking for more. And then he noticed a huge cigar-shaped body thrusting towards him from the sea depths. He thought it was a shark. He was gripped by fear, and he only remembers shooting at the creature's head. The creature did not react. The poacher imagined that this was his end, and then suddenly he felt impact and sharp pain in his back. Then his friend said that he saw everything from the boat. The monster grabbed Poacher's legs and pushed him to the surface. He somehow wriggled out of the creature's jaws. His friend grabbed him by the arms, pulled the Poacher into the boat, started the engine, and sped to the shore. At the hospital, they sewed up the Poacher's bleeding wounds and gave him a blood transfusion. He was miraculously alive, but his right leg was amputated to the knee. Curiously, the Poachers were not believed at that time. People thought that they were trying to evoke sympathy in order to avoid punishment. Huge belugas can still be caught in the Caspian Sea. Can they attack people? Now, usually beluga feeds on fish, but there are cases when even seal cubs have been found in the stomachs of the Caspian beluga. But a tragic incident that happened soon changed the point of view of even staunch skeptics. You see, the body of another poacher was delivered to the morgue. The body, or rather whatever was left of it, was fished out and identified. It turned out to be a black caviar poacher who had been caught poaching more than once. The sight of the body was terrible: a flattened face, flesh torn to the bone. There were marks of many teeth on the torso. How strong the jaws of the attacking creature were could be judged by the unthinkably managed aqualung. The strongest steel of air cylinders was crumpled like a paper cup and bitten through. The wetsuit was torn to pieces. The autopsy pathologist concluded that the diver was attacked by a large sea creature, probably a shark. A shark? If such a tragedy had happened to a person, let's say, in the Pacific Ocean, there would be no doubt that it was the shark. But there are no sharks in the Caspian Sea. Where do they come from? In the distant past, they undoubtedly lived in the waters of this sea. Vacationers often find teeth of the predators in the coastal sand. But this remains might be millions of years old. Is it possible that some creature has managed to survive to the present day? Unlikely. But then perhaps in a giant closed sea there is a monster still unknown to science. Only special scientific investigations can provide the answer. Now, according to Russian researchers, the legendary Jacques Cousteau team, which arrived in Russia in July of 1998 to shoot a new film, also tried to solve this mystery. The French vessel Alcyon, it was robbed in Astrakhan by local criminals for more than $15,000. Well, this vessel sailed the waters of the Caspian Sea looking for answers, again, according to Russian sources. I don't know what they found out. I'm sure we'll find out from the Cousteau Society. But for now, the deadly predator remains unknown. Now, I want to finish this video with a personal experience. Remember those strange, eerie crocodiles? Well, when I spent part of the summer of 1970 in a young pioneer camp, it's something like Boy Scouts in the Soviet Union, outside of Kiev, I heard a very convincing story about such creature from another boy who lived in a village in eastern Ukraine. That much I remember. He gave a very detailed account of how such creatures, and he described them, crawled in the passageways under the village and entered human habitats. Some of them attacked villagers, but not in the case of this boy's family. Apparently, the crocodile got used to its human hosts. I won't forget this story, even though it happened so many years ago, and now I have something to compare his tales to. Well, I thank you for listening. I appreciate your support. If you can, please do so. You can find the links in the description to this video, and I hope to bring you many more interesting materials from Eurasia and Russia. Thank you.